Hi, this is Ian Heller, and you're watching or listening to What If I'm Right? Before going on, just a reminder, hit that subscribe button because that's the way you can support me and my team in trying to bring you the kind of content that's interesting, entertaining, and uplifting. Today I have a special guest, a wonderful screenwriter, actor, playwright, and headline stand-up comic, Marc Unger. He is also I believe he wrote, directed, and produced the Amazon Prime show Thespian. I urge you to watch it. It's terrific. I think you'll enjoy it. His personal story, which is kind of referenced in the show, is the so he currently lives in Baltimore, which is where the show takes place. But he's lived in Brooklyn. That's where he's from. He's from Brooklyn. He's lived in New York City, L.A., Chicago, and now for the last, I think, somewhere around 15 years or so in Baltimore. The reason why I'm mentioning that is because, as a sociologist, place is a really important factor in trying to understand why people behave the way they behave. I'm always interested in how people's behavior is impacted by where they are and where they're from. But I've learned that what informs those feelings are often not actual events or realities, but the perception of events and realities. For example, my background, I used to do a fair amount of criminal defense work as an attorney, both appellate and trial work. And one of the things that you get to kind of talk about all the time is things like crime rate. You're dealing with a whole lot of prosecutors, a whole lot of politicians, a whole lot of police officers. And so the idea of what the crime rate is very, very important to your perspective on your own personal sense of personal safety or security. Now, crime rate, which is basically how often a thing occurs in a given amount of events or time. So could be how many crimes per 100,000 people. You have to have a number of what you're studying, the crime, and the number of people that you're studying it within, or the time frame you're studying it within. And so we frequently refer to a thing called crime rate. Crime rate is usually crimes per 100,000 in per population. Obviously, smaller towns and municipalities are going to have their crime rates are going to be judged on a smaller scale. But nonetheless, crime rate is the thing that most people consider to be just the most seminal thing to understand when determining whether or not they feel safe. And they're completely wrong. Crime rate has very little to do with how they feel, because crime rate is an empirical fact. It's a data point. That's all it is. It's reality. But reality is actually not what you're responding to. It's your perception of reality. That's not like a fine difference. That's a huge difference. Huge difference. The same event viewed by different people will be seen completely differently. The same city, the same town, the same amount of crime around them will be perceived completely differently by each person who is perceiving that crime rate. So I lived in New York City. I was born here. My parents brought me to Teaneck, New Jersey, a beautiful town in New Jersey, suburb of New York. But even while I was a kid, I would describe myself as a New Yorker because I just felt like a New Yorker. It's as simple as that. I was a New Yorker because I felt like I was a New Yorker. We'd come in every week. I went to music school every Saturday from when I was 5 years old until I was graduated high school. So New York felt more like home than Teaneck. I felt like Teaneck was a way station for me, for a lot of people, including one of my sisters who absolutely adored Teaneck. Not me. Just wasn't home for me. And when I finally got the opportunity to move back during law school, man, I was home. At the height of New York's worst crime rate. Worst. I mean, awful. We're talking over 2,000 murders a year. That's insane. I mean, even a city of 8.5 million people shouldn't be seeing that many murders. Just shouldn't. But it was. And yet I loved my city. I knew places that I shouldn't go, that I never would step foot in. And I knew lots of other places that were totally cool. And then, because when you have a place that has such a dramatic distinction between the haves and have-nots, there were edges, areas that just really were edgy. I remember the East Village when I was in law school and a few years thereafter, and it was just, I mean, there was a lot of heroin in those days, just a lot of heroin. But there were also a lot of really cool places to hang out, lots of theaters, lots of just bars that had just really different kinds of people. And when you live in a city that has that many different kinds of people, you learn how to distinguish the difference between a person who is kind of out there and a person you don't want to get near. And, you know, you trust your instincts. That's kind of one of those big things. Oddly enough, an urban center, which is the most human-based environment on the planet. Concrete, skyscrapers, fewer trees, although New York City has a good amount, but still it ain't like nature. Yet in this environment that seems so detached from nature, your instincts actually are heightened. You learn how to identify danger and kind of pay attention to the hair on the back of your neck. And okay, I'm going to cross the street. I see that guy. I see lots of different kinds of people, lots of homeless. That guy, I don't want to be near him. That guy I'm afraid of. What this all leads to is that I'm trying to point out before Marc comes on and talks about his, I'm sure going to tell us a lot about his journey from being an unknown comic to now having his own show on Amazon Prime, which is just wonderful. Where you are, the reality is whatever you think it is. It's your perception is so much more important to your behavior than the reality you're living in. And as I mentioned, he lives in Baltimore. A lot of us New Yorkers, when we move out of the city, we consider ourselves displaced New Yorkers. He might be one of those types. I don't know. But wherever I am, if I'm not in New York, I'm a displaced New Yorker. And I guess a lot of people are saying, go back to New York. I'm nice enough, but, go back to New York. Anyway, a lot of the information that we have about other municipalities is contained in our entertainment, not in news reports, but in television shows. If you want to, books, novels, more than nonfiction. If you really want to understand what it was like to live right before the French Revolution, my recommendation is A Tale of Two Cities, which is just a novel by Charles Dickens, who didn't live at that time or in that place, but he had an understanding of what it felt like to live in that place at that time. And whether that's right, well, probably was right to a limited extent. We focus on the things that we consider to be most important. That's what you learn as a sociologist, among other things. There is a universe of information out there, much too much. It's information overload. So we have to focus on only the things that are most important to us. And things like television shows, and in this case, when we think about Baltimore, what was the name of that? It was Murder. Oh gosh, can't remember the name of the show. It was Homicide, Life on the Streets. Really good show, very edgy, to use the same word. But if you're not from Baltimore and you only see Homicide, even though there were lots of dramatic things that had nothing to do with murder in that show, what you come away with is this notion of that's a dangerous place. If you couple that with politicization of the way people portray urban environments as being inherently dangerous and risky and just awful and just anarchy, why would you ever go there? Well, kind of like A Tale of Two Cities, because there's more to those stories than those facts or apparent facts that are kind of determining how you feel. And so having somebody like Marc on this show, one of the things which I hope we'll be able to touch on is what Baltimore really is. I don't know if you're aware of this. I'm only going to spend another moment or so on this, but I don't know if you're aware of this, but if you're a port city, because Baltimore's a port city, New York's a port city, Philadelphia, most of the major, early cities were big because they were port cities. Baltimore's waterfront, when they revitalized their waterfront a bunch of years ago, decades ago, it led to a renaissance in port cities all over the country, including New York. Nobody realized how valuable that real estate was. Most of the time in the past, we used the rivers as a means of transporting our sewage into the ocean. That's what we want to be near the water so that we can get rid of our waste. Now that we have sewage treatment plants, now we look at at riverfront property or oceanfront property as the most valuable part to settle on, to build a house on, because of the views, because of the wonderful wind that you get from it's just beautiful to live near the water. I live pretty close to the Hudson River. I walk there all the time. The years ago, before Baltimore, at least in this country, before Baltimore came up with this very clever idea, like, hey, this is really good property here. Baltimore was the first to tell the rest of us, you're missing out on the best part of your city. And they changed the perception of what it was to live near the water. It was no longer that it smells like sulfur because of all of the sewage. Now it was a beautiful place being redeveloped. And so when Marc is on, one of the things that I just feel is so important that artists do is they take our experiences, they encapsulate these big experiences and events into small bites for the rest of us to relate to. And that's why I love having somebody like Marc on my show and having somebody like Marc as my friend. So I'm hoping you enjoy. In fact, I'm sure you will enjoy my conversation with Marc, who's fascinating, very funny, and an edgy guy, which is one of the things that I find most interesting about him. In the meantime, just a reminder, don't forget, subscribe. You're listening to Ian Heller. What if I'm right? And now, without further ado, my conversation with Marc Unger. Hi, this is Ian Heller, and you're listening to or watching What If I'm Right? Today I have a wonderful guest, but before I even introduce him, I'm just going to remind you, subscribe, because that's the way we make the big bucks. So please make sure to hit subscribe so that you can stay with us and we can stay with you. Today, I would like to welcome an old friend, colleague, and really one of the most talented people I've worked with. And I've worked with a lot of very talented people. Marc, over a 35-year career, has been a nationally headlining comedian, actor, screenwriter, and radio talk show host. His latest project, Thespian, an episodic dramedy series, which, by the way, I have seen and it's terrific, has won awards at festivals around the world and is currently available on Amazon, Tubi, and other streaming platforms worldwide. Marc Unger, welcome to What If I'm Right with Ian Heller. Nice to see you.
Who would have thought? You know, we were hanging out, almost 30 years ago now, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
In your
uh,
basement.
in my basement. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
my basement apartment that I still talk about, and people still go, "You did what? Uh, you lived where?" In fact, my wife and I were in New York about a month ago, and I walked by. I had shown her the apartment building once, like when we first met, like whatever, 18 years ago. But I walked by it again about a month ago, and it's just every time I see that place, it brings back such a mixture of memories, you
Kinds.
know.
Seriously, a mixture. What do you
Um,
mean?
well, I mean, it was a time in my career. Well, it starts with leaving Chicago, which is where I started comedy, moving back to New York, which is my home. So coming to New York and living in New York, when you're at that point, I was what, 27, 28, something like that. And, just being on your own and the excitement of all that, and then also breaking into the comedy scene in New York, which can be really challenging. But for me, things kind of came kind of easy. I didn't, have to audition 10 times at the comic strip. They saw me once, I got booked. Comedy Cellar, they saw me once, I got booked. Um, so I mean, I was broke. I was broke as hell. I
Well,
mean,
you
it's
did say
so.
comedy, didn't you?
I
Yeah.
mean, back then, we would get like I think Dangerfields paid the most, and they paid like $25 a set. I think comic strip was like 15. So no, I mean, so broke that sometimes I would walk from my apartment on 32nd Street and 3rd, or between 2nd and 3rd, all the way up to the Strip, which was on 81st, I think. So, that's a 50-block walk, that's a nice walk.
It is, although
Um
post-COVID, I gotta tell you, that's like nothing anymore.
Oh, really?
God, I'm walking
You mean for
everywhere.
you? Yeah,
Oh,
oh,
yeah.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
good, good.
Walk about 7 to 10 miles a day now.
What?
Yeah, I do. I teach
7 to
over
10 a
7
day?
to 10 a day. You can take a look at my watch, I'm telling you. I walk up to City College when I teach. That's about a 70-block walk, and if it's nice, I'll sometimes walk back.
How long does it take to walk 7 to 8 miles?
Well, I mean,
Because 'Cause you're not
7, 8
speed
miles.
walking, you're just walking, you're
I'm
just
just walking.
strolling, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I figure that it's about 20 minutes a mile. That's about,
Yeah,
what it
so
is.
that's kinda what I was getting at.
Yeah,
So that's a good chunk of your day.
that's right.
But
And
you know what?
I prep
Y
for teaching. That's when I do my
and
prep.
I'm sure you're listening to podcasts or
Yeah.
books or, whatever you're doing. So, yeah, it's still quality time. But anyway, so, yeah, so it was a time in my life, you know, sort of I was rising in the industry. So there was that kind of buzz. But again, I was broke. There were times when I was lonely, just in terms of not being able to find, true romance. I mean, I, you know, sowed my oats, sowed your oats, sowed all the oats. All the oats have been sown. But it's not the same, you know?
Yeah, being on stage is rather a shocking. It's just amazing how no matter how low you are, when you get on stage, somehow you get elevated in a lot of people's eyes,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
you know?
Yeah, that's
I
true.
was
Well,
attacked
I
once
mean, you're
in a
faking
cover.
it.
What's that?
You're faking it, basically.
I mean, when I was on the road with my band in Syracuse, I basically got attacked on New Year's Eve by a bunch of, I mean, the girls like 17 to 19, 18 to 20. I don't know how old they were. I have no idea. They rented a limo.
Yeah,
I got into the limo and they
bachelorette
basically
party.
jumped over the back. It was kind of a, well, I mean, it's a great memory,
Yeah.
but I mean, I was just a cover band lead singer. That's all I was. I was nothing out there. It's like, ooh, so go figure. So you were rising in the ranks and that brought you, you were writing. What I really want to hear about though is I remember we were working on that one man show, which by the
Mhm.
way, I thought was fabulous. I remember you writing about your grandmother, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
Um,
the death, yeah, when she died and how devastating it was. Yeah,
yeah, I mean, it was a
yeah.
great show and I never actually saw it performed. Did you ever actually do
Performed
that
it
one?
a couple times at the comic strip. Um, I think what happened there, well, first of all, the show was basically about me on the road. Um, I can't remember the exact conceit. I think it was basically I was stuck in a motel room, and all you have left, and everything. It's late at night. That's what it was. It's late
Yeah,
at night. Everything's closed.
right.
No place. There's not even Denny's isn't even whatever. There's nothing there. So all I'm left with is my rantings and ruminations, which was the name of the show, ranting and ruminations from room 103 or something like that. Um, and so it's sort of like the frustration of being a comedian, the frustration of life, and just all the stuff you think about when you're stuck in your head. People really liked it. So that happened um, at a point where I had gotten representation, not an agent, but managers, new managers. I was managed by a combination of Lucian Hold, who was the guy who ran a legend in comedy, who ran the comic strip, and then a guy named Ted Schachter, who saw me at the comic strip and partnered up, and he was the LA guy for me. So what happened was, so here I am, I'm in New York. I'm in the conversation at that point with guys like Jim Gaffigan, Greg Giraldo, who was actually a really good friend of mine, um, Bill Burr, Tom Papa, all of these guys were we were also sort of the same class. So my manager Ted gets me a showcase for the agency APA out in LA. So I go out there, I do it at the Improv. This is basically I buy a ticket, go out there. I got a return ticket. I'm going to go back to New York, obviously, and I get signed ostensibly that night. I mean, obviously the paperwork has to get filled out and all that, but I get signed by APA. The next day, I am on every lot in LA. I am in all of them, Disney, this, that. I'm the thing of the minute, I guess, whatever it was. But I didn't understand that, and I really didn't want to be in LA. I didn't like LA. And I remember I said to Ted, I said, okay, well, I'm glad we had these meetings. I'm heading back to New York and I got my ticket. And he's like, what are you talking about? So, what do you mean? What am I talking about? That's where I live. That's where my stuff is. It's in the basement in New York. And he's like, you can't leave. It's like, there's too
Yeah.
much heat. This is happening. That's happening. So he gave me the money to buy a cheap car. And I had a friend. I don't know if you remember Sam Brown,
I know the name, but I
comedian.
don't recall. No. Yeah.
He was a friend of mine who was living in LA. So I crashed with him, stayed with him actually for a few months. But the bottom line is, next thing I know, my stuff, whatever little shit I had, is being sent to LA, and I'm in LA. Now, the really interesting thing about this, the night before I left New York to go to this showcase at the Improv in LA, I was hanging out. There was a bar across the street from the comic strip called, I think it was Brady's. I'm almost positive it was Brady's. And it was a place we would go between sets and whatever to, hang out. So it was me, Greg Giraldo. I remember they were there. Paul Mercurio, I think, was there. Maybe Tom Papa. But we're sitting there, and I said, and I swear to everything in the universe, this is exactly what I said. I said, "You know what, man? There's no fucking way I'm going out to LA so I can end up the guy on Friends," right? The first gig
Oh,
I book is Friends. You know, I robbed their
oh,
apartment, I steal all the but I and I and I swear I said that. Um, and when I booked it, and this was against, you go to agent, I mean, the casting director, then you go to producers, and there's this whole thing. And it was I was up against other comedians and actors and all that, and well, we all know about that. And I remember my manager Ted called me up and he said, "Hey, superstar, I got good news," which is like the cliche, like it's like
Yeah,
all the
yeah,
things I've never been comfortable with,
yeah.
you know. Um, and for a lot of people, they would have been swooning. They would have been over them. Like, what? I booked Friends, and then I was reading for this and reading for that. Um, and then pilot season came, and I kept getting these horrible, horrible, bad sitcom scripts. This was sort of right before. I just have the worst luck in entertainment history. So this is like right before the golden age, or the most recent golden age, when shows like The Sopranos came out and all. This is before that. So sitcoms still mostly suck. They were Friends. And if you're a comedian, you're not getting intelligent characters to play. You're getting
Right.
idiots. You're getting the dumb friend of the guy, or
The
the this or the
fringe,
that.
the fringe guys that
It's,
make
the
things.
garb.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I was actually up for replacing, I forget who it was, in the show Men Behaving, not Men Behaving, I think it was called Men Behaving Badly. Like I went to network on that, I think, or at least upper producer, whatever, who cares. So as all this is going on, and I'm in LA, and again, as I said earlier, the idea of finding somebody, of a woman that I could really fall in love with in LA, that so didn't happen. That was like the craziest women I've ever met in my life were in LA. I mean, one just after the other, after the other, after the other. And in the meantime, and I may have been working on this when I knew you, or it might have been right after. I wrote a screenplay, or started working on a screenplay called Adam's Rock, which was about. I used to do a bit in my act about how there was no reason to like invest in anything. There was no reason to like buy a house, because every day there's a 1 in 10,000 chance that an asteroid could wipe out the Earth. It was a whole bit, and it was a really good bit, and I was kind of known for it. So I wrote a screenplay called Adam's Rock, which is about two best friends, one sort of based on me and my philosophies at the time. you know, that guy can't commit to a relationship, can't commit to anything, has, his savings account is his sock drawer, which is what mine was in New York. Um, but meanwhile, he has a best friend who's the opposite, salt of the earth guy, ex minor league baseball player who could have gone to the majors, but his dad got sick and died, so he had to take over the family business, a restaurant, a diner that had been originally was set in New York. Um, and one day, my character Adam sees Casey, his best friend's wife. He catches her in the basically having an affair. He sees her having sex with somebody, and it makes him reevaluate everything he's ever thought about commitment and all that. Sends him on sort of this existential
Yeah.
journey, because if he should he tell his friend? Well, if monogamy is not a big deal, why even bother to tell his friend? And
Right.
on and on.
Right.
So ultimately, what Adam learns through this experience is that yes, asteroids can wipe out the Earth, but that's not why you don't invest in love and life. That's exactly why you do. You know. Um, so people like the script a lot, and we did a stage reading in LA, and my manager Ted was at Sundance, and he pitched it to somebody who optioned it. And as it so happened, this was an independent producer who just happened to live in Baltimore. There was no
Oh.
connection, right? So I'm like, wow, really? This is everything I wanted. I didn't want sitcoms. I didn't want to be goofy comedy guy.
He wanted to be an actor.
I wanted to be an actor and a writer and a director,
Right.
you know, the Woody Allen path, let's say,
Right.
with my voice. But so the deal gets signed, and as part of the deal, I have to move back to Baltimore or go back to Baltimore to do a rewrite with this guy. That's supposed to be a 3-month rewrite, which I was fine with. I mean, I didn't like the stuff I was auditioning for anyway. I'm going to go make a movie. And I remember driving across country back to Baltimore. I specifically remember driving through the Rockies, listening to Bob Seger. And at some point I pulled over, probably to urinate, but I pulled over for whatever reason. And I just looked out and I could not believe that every dream I'd ever had was about to happen. I really, really believed that.
Yeah. Here comes
So I
the
get to
asteroid.
Baltimore. Yeah. And so the reality is the guy who optioned the script, he is a lawyer who had produced, he was a lawyer and a sports agent. And he had produced one thing, but he thought of himself as, because he read Robert McKee's book. So, you know, the famous screenwriting guru. Do you ever see Adaptation? Okay. There's a character in there that's supposed to be basically Robert McKee. That's played by Brian Cox. It's about a screenwriter who's frustrated, can't write. Anyway, so this guy, he wants to rewrite, but he wants to sit with me and go over every word, like, you know, like we're doing a legal brief or something, you know, and this 3-month process. And then he would disappear because he would have other business interests and things. I ended up in Baltimore for about a year, almost a year. And I remember getting so frustrated at one point that he and I were outside arguing about something. And I said, you know what your fucking problem is? The problem is that your muse is Clarence Darrow. You know?
He's
So
great,
anyway,
great speaker.
yeah, right. Yeah. And a great legal mind, but
Yeah.
you know, not a guy you want writing your play.
Unless it's
Probably.
Inherit the Wind, you know.
Right. I just saw that the other day, actually. Or
Phenomenal.
saw it for the 10th time.
Just phenomenal. Yeah.
So I go back to LA finally, and you know the industry as well as anybody. This is a year later.
Mm-hmm.
I'm toast.
Mm-hmm.
My agent has dropped me.
Yeah, you're forgotten.
Completely forgotten.
Yeah.
So if I have to point to one thing that really sort of damaged my career, it would have been that experience. This thing that I thought was going to be the greatest. And then we find out that the way this guy, this schmuck, this fucking idiot, the way he got the money to be able to pay me, and by the way, pay himself, is he got it from a dentist and a veterinary or an animal dentist. I think he's an animal dentist. Oh no, he was an animal activist, animal rights activist, and a dentist. And he gave this guy that I'm talking about, a bridge loan for $50,000. Well, by rights, to this day, some dentist in DC owns Adams Rock because he never got paid back.
And that's what he used as collateral. Yeah. So I'm not going to go into great detail about my story, but we certainly share some scars. You know, mine came from Atlantic Records, who offered me a deal. And then the woman who was in the A&R division, I saw that she was married to a band that just went, in its first album, went double platinum. I called her up to say, hey, that's fantastic. I heard your husband's band went double platinum. And she said, yeah, that's good news for me, not so much for you. She left Atlantic Records and she said, you're what's considered an orphan. Nobody at Atlantic is going to pick you up because they all want to divide the promotional money and the recording money into larger pieces rather than keep the same number of pieces in the pie. So that just, I mean, that's just freaking Atlantic Records. It's one of the 6 major labels saying,
sure.
we love you. And then saying, yeah, but the woman who loved you left. So So yeah, I mean, and I have more stories, but that was like one of the war stories. But I actually
Well,
want,
actually, no,
yeah, go ahead.
let me just
No, that's
because
right.
you don't understand how close this actually is to my story because
Uh,
there's more.
yeah.
Um, Something else that kind of happened, and this was before I went back to Baltimore to rewrite to work on this script that didn't get made, the film didn't get made. The person who loved me, also a woman, the one who saw me at the improv that first night, who
Hmm.
signed me on the spot,
Uh,
she left to go to a management company. And I was left, like you said, orphaned. And I was picked up by somebody who kind of looked at me like, who the hell are you? Like he doesn't
right.
even know who I am,
Yeah,
you know?
you're the
Um,
stepchild that's totally unwanted.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that,
Welcome to
that's
Cinderella.
also part of why, and then also, and then we'll move on, I promise. But you know, you got me thinking.
Yeah, the juices are
Another thing
flowing.
that
I get it. Yeah.
happened that, this was still when I was in New York. Remember back then the big thing was the Montreal Comedy
Oh,
Festival
sure.
and the New Faces show was that was your ticket. You know, the guys were getting signed to deals off of that. So I do my showcase set at in New York at the comic strip. Uh I get off stage and this agent, I'll never forget, at that time a very young agent and new. Now he's very, very well known and I think he's like retiring soon. He walked up to me. He goes, "Mark, if you don't get this festival, I'll quit the business." You know, he's
Yeah.
retiring a
Yeah.
multimillionaire now.
Yeah.
Um, so part of why I signed with APA and agreed to live in LA, and this is a big part of it, it's kind of coming back to me. It's because back then, the bigger agencies, they were gifted basically one slot at the New Faces show.
Mm,
They could almost pick anybody they wanted.
yeah.
So that was supposed to be me. All right. So I'm thinking I got the
You're
festival.
done. Yeah, you're good.
I get a phone call from my agent, my comedy agent, at APA and my manager. They're both on the phone. Then when that happens, never nothing good
Not
ever
a good
comes from
thing.
that.
Not a good thing.
And they gave me the sad voice. Well, Mark,
Mark, I'm so
we've
sorry.
decided that we're going to go with this other guy. And this other guy was big, really big at the time. I mean, well, tall guy. Um, uh, Black. Um, and honestly, he got funnier over the years, but at that point, I didn't think he was very funny at all. He certainly wasn't anywhere near as funny as I was. That's just objectively true.
That's an
Uh,
empirical truth. Okay, yeah, got
yes,
it. Okay,
I mean,
got it. Okay.
and they gave him the festival because again, there were other considerations, and you know what was, you know what the industry was looking for at the time, and you know, I guess they didn't need another me; they needed a him. You know, at least
Yeah,
that's what APA felt. So yeah,
it's
I get it.
and you never know
Welcome
what's
to
the
Two Bitter Home Jews.
well, and you also never know if what they're telling you is actually what's going on because they don't have any obligation to tell you the truth. But
And they don't even know how to.
I mean, it would
They
only by
they lose
chance.
that skill.
It's kind
Right.
of like a stop clock. You know, you'll
Yeah.
get it twice a day. Okay, that's
Yeah.
about it. But here's, I'm glad that you talked about a little bit of your travels. You know, New York, L.A., Baltimore, because when you and I spoke about coming on, what if I'm right? Um, you were telling me all about the work that you've been doing and how much the location, in this case, Baltimore, has been such an inspiration to your writing. And also, and so one of the things that people just, people always wonder, where do you get inspiration from? Well, you don't really know. You put yourself in a place to get lucky, and then you just try and pay attention and you just do the work. And often if you do it enough, it actually happens a fair amount of time, but you have to keep on, you got to keep on at it, keep on at it, keep on at it. And you were telling me about Thespian, which is that wonderful dramedy that you have on Amazon and Tubi, um, and how influenced you have been by the goings on in Baltimore. Now, just before you answered, I just want to set this up a little more. My background, as you know, I'm an attorney. I'm a sociologist. I'm a musician, I'm a performer, like a lot of different things, more careers than I have fingers and toes. And so a professor, so when we talk about art, art doesn't live in a vacuum. Art is about taking what is out there that everybody sees and putting it into a frame that everybody admires, whether they admire it because it's hitting them hard in love or hate or passion or whatever it is. Art gives an artist an opportunity to bring people along with an examination that shows more truth often than just mere observation does. And I would love for you to take us on a little bit of the journey that has led you. We can start with Thespian and work back. We can start with some of the early stuff and move forward. But what I really love about for this show is the intersection of art and the world.
I'll start with this. I don't give it that much thought.
You don't have
I
to.
don't,
Nobody says you have to
yeah,
actually think about it.
it's just sort of who I am. It's
Right.
just, I've been creating things in one form or another since, I could crawl, I mean, like, just vivid imagination when I was a kid, playing with GI Joes and writing Star Trek episodes that we would perform in 3rd grade. And, so that, I mean, that it's never not been there. Um, I think that as artists, we have our own singular viewpoint. Um, it's how we process the world, and it doesn't matter necessarily what we're writing. Like, I can write Thespian, which is, at least the first episode. Well, we'll talk about the character of Adam Kellner. Or in Adam's Rock, it was Adam Vogler.
Adam
Yeah.
seems to be a big one for you.
Yeah, well, I brought Adam back on purpose for Thespian because I wanted to be reminded of that Adam that, had been created all those years ago. Um, I said once when we were at a film festival, somebody asked, "How close am I as a person to my character, Adam Kellner?" I said, "I think Adam is a lot more likable than me." Uh, I
Ooh,
don't know if that's
should
actually
should
true.
should I not have said that?
Um, it's probably not true. It's just something you say at a festival, but I mean, he's more, in some ways, he's more interesting. That's because that's our job as artists. Like, because our actual lives, even if we think they're that interesting, they're not really that interesting.
No,
Like, you and I could, talk about these great stories and failure stories, but you can't make a movie out of that. No one's gonna go.
they're
No one gives a shit.
snippets, but they're
Yeah,
just snippets from our lives.
and you have to
You're
heighten it.
curating, and you're
Yes.
curating them, and then you embellish. That's right.
Yes. And that's the critical thing. And when I teach screenwriting, I don't really teach stand up because I think that's a scam, because I don't think you can teach stand up. But I have taught, like, comedic storytelling, because storytelling has rules. Um, and the thing that I notice from most people is that they don't understand that you have to dig deeper. You have to dig deeper.
Yeah.
You think what you wrote, because it came out of your mind, is good. It's not. It's a start, but there's so much more there. And most people, I think, until you become an artist or understand what being an artist means, they think they're creating art. But I mean, look, Picasso and any painter, they don't just go and it's done. Maybe Jackson Pollock did, but
And my guess is even he doesn't.
and I
Quite
was gonna say,
frankly,
yeah,
you know what?
I get it.
Otherwise, he wouldn't have been Jackson Pollock.
It was just going. It just, instead of it being on the canvas.
That's right.
Well, first of all, it was on the canvas, and I'm sure he threw those away. We just never saw them because he wasn't ready to present them. But you're working and working and working. I'm good friends because we met in L.A. There's a playwright, Stephen Adly Girgis, who wrote it won the Pulitzer Prize, Between Riverside and Crazy. He's the guy now who wrote the adaptation of Dog Day Afternoon.
Right. You had mentioned that to me. Yeah.
But I mean, Girgis is a phenomenal writer, And I remember watching him or talking to him, it doesn't just come, you know?
No.
It's it's
No,
it's
you
agon
dig.
it's agonizing.
Yep.
And it so you see beauty where others see the mundane. You see ugly where others see the mundane. As an artist, we're hypersensitive, I think, to experiences, to sights and sounds and
Certainly in our art.
visuals.
But
Yeah.
certainly in our art,
Well,
because sometimes the artist is indifferent to other human beings, but is not, but has an incredible pathos to certain experiences that they're able to share. Because some of them are absolute assholes, and they come across in artistically as wonderful, good human beings, and they're not.
guess I understand what you're saying, but I guess that gets into the question of define artist. I mean, like, to me, like if you're talking about actors who
Hmm.
are assholes, that gets into the question of, is acting an art or a craft? Which is one of those let's smoke a lot of pot and discuss
Yeah,
this kind of questions.
we'll do that
But
in
but
another
but
episode that
but
nobody
but
watches.
it's a
Yeah,
valid question.
right.
To me, art is you have to create something from absolute nothing, um, to truly be an artist. Yes, I mean, there are artists who have been, you know, just like brutal to women,
Yeah.
but I don't think they're painting, because I was thinking of a painter, particular painter just now because I'm working on this project. Um, I don't know that beauty came through in his art either. Like, I'm not sure I buy the idea that you can be a miserable, horrible human being, but but able to write loving. I can't think of an example of that. I'm
Well,
not saying they're
I
not
mean,
out there.
quite frankly, I can look at Woody Allen and say that he's a monster, having basically groomed and married his stepdaughter. I can look at Charles Dickens, who was a horrible man, and yet his stuff was so wonderful. And he had, from my understanding, is he had his wife sent to an insane asylum, which in those days it was like death. And so I think there are a lot of examples of them
But
whose
wait,
art is beauty, and yet their behavior is atrocious.
okay, so we're going down an avenue that not sure
And we
we
don't have to
completely
keep
agree
on
on.
going there.
But that's
Yeah,
but that's okay.
yeah.
I don't know anything really about Dickens' personal life, so I can't comment on that. Um, Woody Allen, I think there's more than one way to view that story. But even regardless of what you think, their darkness in both cases is clearly in their art.
Absolutely.
So it's not like they're hiding from that. So some of that is on us. Some of that is how we're viewing what they're giving it to us. They're saying, "Look, this is who I am." I mean, if you want to look at a movie like Manhattan, you
Right.
know,
Which
right?
is pedophilia basically
Or
on the silver
or
screen,
or characters, crimes and misdemeanors. You
which is
know,
one of my all-time
he
favorites.
he manages to manipulate us to a point where some people sympathize with Martin Landau.
That's right.
He's a monster.
That's right.
He's an
So
absolute monster.
and I hear exactly what and we can go on, but we're not gonna
I know, I
for
know, I know. Yeah.
but what I really do want to kind of bring you back to something that I think is just fascinating, and that is your relationship with the city of Baltimore in
Sure.
particular, because that just hit me when we were talking. It just hit me, and I'd like to share that.
Well, it's interesting because my family moved to Baltimore from Brooklyn. I grew up with like that Brooklyn. My childhood was terrible because my parents were alcoholics and all that stuff. But there was that idyllic part of living in Brooklyn in the '70s and pizza places and pinball machines and, wall ball and stoop
Spike
ball
Lee,
and this
man.
ball and yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah, it was Spike Lee.
Which I got to live.
Yeah.
Um, so moving to Baltimore, first of all, it was just a horrible thing for me because I loved living in Brooklyn. My friends were all in Brooklyn. So I never really felt I remember when we got to Baltimore because we lived actually in Baltimore County, which is the suburbs. Um, so I remember like the first day of school, gym class, the gym teacher came out with these sticks that had netted baskets on them. And I'm like, what the hell is that? And they were lacrosse sticks. Lacrosse is actually big in parts of New York, but it
Not
wasn't
in the
big in
city, man.
Brooklyn. Yeah, nobody played and I truly didn't know what a lacrosse stick was. So, the fact that there was grass to play, in New
Right.
York,
He
it,
smoked grass.
it
That's
was
what you did.
cement, right? It was cement. I mean, our playgrounds were cement. I mean,
And
the
there was
only
one tree
time,
in Brooklyn. Yeah. Yeah.
right, and it kept growing.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I always kind of my goal was always to get back to New York, which kind of ties back to what I was saying way earlier in this conversation when I was in New York, when I knew you and, top of the world and all that stuff. Um, so eventually, I started my career and I did break out of Baltimore. I escaped, and I thought that was going to be it for I was never, I'd come back to visit. I don't want to live in this place. It's not my home. It's a secondary city. It's not where I want to be. I'm a New Yorker, and I still to this day consider myself a New Yorker first. Um, but that's because, if you're in a place till you're 14 or 15 years old, that does define you, I think just in terms of personality development and yes, Um, so when I ended up back in Baltimore, my plan was to come here. This was coming out of LA, which was becoming bad things were happening. I knew that if I stayed in LA, it wasn't gonna end well for me. I need to get out. So I came to Baltimore for what I thought would be a few months, and then I was gonna go back to New York and, resume comedy and try to get back to where I had been in New York. And then at some point I met my wife, who's now we've been together for 18 years and married for 16 years, and my wife is I can't do better. And she's everything I've ever wanted, in all facets, beauty, intelligence, kindness. Um, and I find that we are living in an apartment that is, well, in the show, it's directly across the street. In truth, it's maybe another 20 yards. It's just not direct. It's not literally directly across the street, just visually for shots over the shoulder of me looking at the apartment. It made more sense to have the apartment be right across, right? That's the apartment that I had left at that point 25 years earlier to start my career. Um, Now when you're hit with that realization, that can really depress that could really become a debilitating, horrible thought, you know? But I didn't let that happen. Instead, I made a show about it. And, I've gotten more emotional and artistic and financial support from Baltimore than any other place I've ever been, you know? And people, obviously who know the work that I can do, both as a stand-up and as, the co-creator and the writer-director of Thespian, they love it. And I've walked down the streets of Baltimore, and I've had people, like, call out from cars, you know? "Hey, you're Marc Unger," which is cool, and I don't mean and the cool part about that isn't the, "Oh, fan worship," it's it's that I've made them feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and Baltimore is a very, very unique city, and people who haven't been here or don't know this about Baltimore, there is a deep and rich and in some ways very quirky and hip cultural artistic history that I don't think people are aware of. I don't think people understand how important a city Baltimore once was. Um, and that's still here. That vibe is still here. There is a really incredible music scene in Baltimore. It's one of the greatest in the world. Um, guys like Frank Zappa from Baltimore. Um,
I was a huge fan.
yeah. So So the infrastructure is there, and it is a wonderful place to make art. And, in Baltimore, I don't have to worry about, you know, did I get a permit? You know? I mean, yeah, if I had a big film crew or something, I was trying to block off streets, that would be a problem. But if I'm filming, a small independent project, no one's really gonna bother me, and I get to tell the story that I wanna tell. I also don't feel pressured, by, like, if you're in LA, it's like, "What do you got? What 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 do you got?" Here, I can just feel like what I feel like, what do I wanna make? And to me, that's true art, you know? Um, and it's been great, but again, I know that you wanted to talk I thought you wanted to talk about this a little bit. You know, Baltimore I was in a play recently called No Mean City that was written by, actually a longtime and well-known columnist for the Baltimore Sun named Dan Rodricks, who, since he's finished with that part of his career, he's kinda turned to writing kind of historical plays about Baltimore. Some of them are based on transcripts and, all that stuff. This one has some of that. So this play is about 1966, and it's the year that the Orioles went to the World Series for the first time. And it's also a summer when there were violent protests, racist protests all throughout Baltimore. And I actually got to play two roles, two small but very important roles. I played a guy named Connie Lynch, who was a white racist. He wasn't KKK, but basically he was. They were called something else. But
John
that's
Birch,
that's
maybe?
it wasn't John Birch.
Okay. Because
I
that
don't
was
think
very that was
no,
big in
John Birch was
Baltimore,
big.
actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I'm not sure. I
Okay,
can't
it's
remember.
okay.
But just a rabid racist, and they parked a truck in Patterson Park, which is it's certainly not Central Park. I'm trying to think what I would compare it to in New York, but I
But it
can't
doesn't
really
matter because
doesn't matter.
I
It's
may
a
be the
park.
only one in New York who's, who would understand it anyway, so it doesn't matter.
It's a
So,
that's true, right?
yeah,
It's a park.
yeah.
But it's a park in a city neighborhood. It's a green space. Um, so they parked this truck and they were giving these speeches, these anti-black speeches, and I had to perform one of these speeches that Dan had taken from the actual transcripts of his because he got arrested. And Dan kind of cleaned up the language because he didn't want to use the words that the exact word, the N word. He didn't
Right.
want, he didn't he,
Probably throughout. Yeah.
so he wrote around it a
Right.
little bit. So I had to find a way to say that word without saying that word, and I did. And I would get off stage and the backstage crew would just be like, "Holy shit. Where did that come from? You're such a nice guy." I'm like, "Well, because I'm acting." It's
Right.
but it takes a lot, a lot.
Yeah.
And then I'm also playing the team trainer for the Baltimore Orioles, who's sort of the comic relief of the play. So on the one hand, I'm the embodiment of the antagonist because the antagonist in this play is racism, and I'm the embodiment of that. And the Orioles represent hope and light and all that stuff. So it was a really interesting play. But there's a line in there where one of the characters says Baltimore is both the southernmost northern city
Mm.
and the northernmost southern city. And that's exactly right. People I think forget that as far as I know, the first casualties of the Civil War, pre-Civil War, were in Baltimore. Yeah, there's a Baltimore riots when Lincoln was coming through to get to DC for his inauguration. And I mean, I'm looking out my window at the very street
Wow.
where this happened because I
Wow.
I live downtown Baltimore, right. I'm looking at the water now. I'm looking at the harbor. Um, People don't know that, and I'm also doing research for a play that's set in 1930. So I'm going back and reading a lot of newspapers and all this stuff. Baltimore was considered more segregated than Richmond, Virginia in the 1930s.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I'm a New Yorker, as you know, as you are. The most segregated public school system in the country, New York City. Now
Wow.
yeah.
I didn't know
Now,
that.
yeah. Now it may be
Segregated public school or
public
schools?
school, public
Okay.
schools, most segregated. And it's not by design, intentional design, but when something remains in a particular orientation for long enough, then not changing it becomes an intention. And so we haven't changed it enough in New York to overcome whether it was intentional or not, the consequences are horrific. And they also are very revelatory. You can see what this means about where racism lives. It's everywhere, man. It's everywhere. And getting back to Baltimore, what I have seen in the public world of Baltimore basically was Homicide, right? Isn't that the name of it?
Or the
Homicide.
Wire, or the Wire is
Oh,
the one.
well, even better,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
You're talking about basically demonstrating what a city is in the only way that most people will ever actually see it, and doing it in a way that's going to get fannies in the seats, but is absolutely, completely destructive to the entirety of what the city is. And I've seen that living in New York, because it is so central to it. People won't like to hear this, but New York, in a time of capitalism where the United States is the center, at least currently, center of capitalism in the world, the center of the center is New York. And so
without question.
Yeah, but
Right.
we've got Broadway also. So you love it, you hate, you can love it, you hate, Wall Street. We got Broadway. We got the Yankees. You can love or hate them. It doesn't matter. We've got so many different cultural things that people get to see and define us by that you don't even seeing, like Law and Order, which may come, actually, they're constantly recording in my neighborhood, which pisses me the hell off because alternate side of the street parking gets totally screwed. But that aside, if that were the only way we saw New York, that would be absolutely ridiculous. But for cities like Baltimore, it can be the essence of what other people think of when they think about Baltimore. And that's why I want to talk to you, because sure, there was a homicide rate that was horrible and it's gotten better, but it's still
much better.
It could still stand improvement, but it's much better than it was. But we're not going to hear that story. And that's because it doesn't sell as well as hatred.
Well, first, I just wanted, you mentioned Wall Street, and then you said, but we also have Broadway and the Yankees.
That's right.
All three of those things are actually part of the same thing. You know what I mean? Broadway is capitalism. The Yankees are capitalism.
But everything is. I mean, look,
I just thought it's funny, that if you think about it, Broadway and
but
Wall
so
Street,
are you.
they're all different. Yeah.
But the thing is, when you're living, unless you have enough money that you don't have to worry about it.
Sure, of course.
You have to enter into that world. And so you do it, I do it, we all do it. And quite frankly, capitalism to me is the worst form of economics except for all the others.
Right. See, I like being the opposite. I like having so little money I don't have to worry about it.
Wait, that's you can do that.
So here's the thing about Baltimore. Baltimore, like many cities, but Baltimore in particular, there were some laws that were passed. I'm not a historian, so I don't know the dates on everything. I don't really care that much. Where Black people literally were not allowed to move into certain neighborhoods.
Redlining.
And conversely, white people weren't allowed to move into certain Black neighborhoods. It was
by law they weren't permitted, or
that's
just
how
by.
I'm pretty sure by law. It's a kind of a famous thing. We can look into it.
Interesting, yeah.
And if I'm wrong, correct me.
I'm going to send this over to Emmett. Emmett, when you see this, I want you to find out about it, and then you'll write about it in the thing. So
I know that it was, I believe anyway, it was a peculiar thing to Baltimore. that isn't as simple as
Okay.
redline.
All right.
So that created, obviously that immediately creates segregation, right? And then of course white flight and all that stuff. And so even to this day, Baltimore is one of those cities where you can be in a neighborhood that you feel great in. You can go 2 blocks, 3 blocks in the wrong direction and things change,
Philly
you
is
know?
like that to me
Yeah,
also.
Philly is very
I
much like
couldn't
that.
believe
Yeah.
it because I'm not.
Yeah.
That isn't the way it feels in New York. It just
No, not at
isn't.
all. No, 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 no. Even back in the bad old days of New
Yeah.
York,
No,
it
no.
still didn't feel like this street versus that
You go
street.
to the Village and everybody's hanging out.
Right, 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 right. Um, so then, so obviously, like many cities, the tax base left, right? So a city that was once over 1 million people is down to I think about 600,000 now or something like that.
Like Detroit.
Um, but you look around, the architecture is still here.
Mm-hmm.
The infrastructure from that period, from those earlier periods, is still here. It's just abandoned. And in some cases, people are starting to buy some of those buildings and they clean them up. But I'm telling you, man, you walk down Calvert Street, where I live, within a 2 or 3 block radius, there is some of the most gorgeous architecture that I've
Mm.
ever seen. And part of that is, and it's a similar story in Chicago, is because there was a fire. The people don't really talk about the Baltimore fire. Everyone knows about the Chicago fire, right? We know about the San Francisco earthquake. Well, the third biggest, I can't call it a tragedy because lives weren't lost. The third biggest mass incident, of that type is the Baltimore fire.
Really?
Again, not a historian. 1903, 1904. I know it was within like a 3 or 4 year period of that. '06 maybe?
Well, 6 is San Francisco
Oh, '06 in San
earthquake. So
Francisco.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. So from the harbor, which is Pratt Street, up to where City Hall is now, and certain points west and east, everything burned to the ground. Every building was gone. There's like 2 buildings or 3 buildings that had been recently built that had a little bit more proofing that survived. So you've got a downtown that needs to be rebuilt. So that's an opportunity to bring in architects with
That's right.
vision,
That's
which is
right.
also what happened in Chicago.
Yeah.
Um,
It's what
to
happened in a lot of cities after World War II.
Sure. Um, so there are places here that are just breathtaking, and the mansions in Mount Vernon, and the wealth that was in this city, tremendous wealth. Again, a banking capital, a true financial center,
Mm-hmm.
built on shipping and the shipping industry and the railroad industry, and tycoons lived in Baltimore. Um, those days are gone, and what's left is too much hostility towards the city. The idea that Baltimore is that place that that we don't go to. Something that also is unique about Baltimore. And I want to get this right. Baltimore is a city where it's not in a county.
It's not a county itself because New York is 5 counties.
Right. Well, yeah, I'd have to look it up. But I know there's something unique about the relationship between Baltimore, the city, and the state in terms of funding and
Well, yeah, that's
even
the reason.
police and things like that.
Yeah, those are those. I don't know. That organizational way of doing things is all about taxes. I
Right.
mean, it's
Right.
all about taxes.
Right.
So how do you get the? I'm sorry, but I just
That's good.
really
Sure.
want to understand something. Taking whether it's intentional or not, how does Baltimore end up in your writing, in your art? Whether or not that's by intent, I don't care. What I care about is how does it manifest itself?
How does it manifest itself?
Yeah, artistically.
I mean, I think it has to do with when you've lived in a place long enough, you sort of filter and take in the vibe of that place. So obviously, as a New Yorker and living in New York, when I was writing Adam's Rock, that was a New York moment for me. Um, this, and we actually do have scenes in Thespian that are set in New York later on in the series. But Baltimore is what I see every day. Baltimore is where I am. The people. I don't. I mean, I think with Thespian, I don't want to say that Baltimore is just a backdrop because it's not. It's a character.
Hmm.
But I wouldn't say that Thespian is. I think getting back to what you were saying about The Wire and Homicide, and that's really how most people view Baltimore,
Yeah,
almost exclusively.
you're right.
If you watch Thespian and other shows, I think out there that people are making independently, what you'll see is that there are really quirky, fun neighborhoods. For instance, there is a vibrant waterfront, Fells Point, which is a really cool place to go. There's the Baltimore Museum of Art, which houses the largest collection of Matisse paintings in the world.
Amazing.
In the world.
That's amazing.
Um, I mean, the aquarium, the National Aquarium, that's the biggest aquarium in the world, is in Baltimore, or at least the biggest aquarium in the country. Um, so there's and also it's known as, in fact, there's a character in Thespian who says this: Baltimore is becoming a foodie paradise. And it really is. There are people who come to Baltimore from DC and from other places, Philadelphia, to come to some of the restaurants in Baltimore because they've gained that great of a reputation. With street food, even. Um, it's a mixture of people trying to survive and trying to make the city better. And staying here in the city as in hopes that others will join us. you know because what I started to say before was, and so that's, I keep going back to that rather than the art of Thespian, because I feel like Thespian is a show about people, and those people, which I guess all shows are, but I mean, those people could sort of live anywhere. I don't know that it's so Baltimore centric. I honestly, I just don't. I don't really view it that way. Um, you know, and again, I think, yeah, I don't, so
Uh, y-
I honestly, I don't know how to answer that question completely, because I'm not, I, I don't think of, like, I know what a Baltimore person is, and I'm not that. I'm really not. I don't have that sensibility. I don't have that. I mean, there's even a difference between a Baltimore Jew, or actually a Pikesville Jew. That's where most of the Jewish people in Baltimore live. It's Pikesville, and a Brooklyn, New York Jew like me or you. Well, you're not, maybe not Brooklyn, but
now my side comes from the Bronx. We're
okay.
Yankees.
And
We're
even that's
Yankees.
probably a little different.
Oh, absolutely. We didn't go to the island. When my parents
Yeah,
dragged me out of New York, it was to
yeah.
Teaneck, New Jersey, not to the Long Island, which is what, if you lived in Brooklyn or Queens, you often went east along along Long Island. If you were from the Bronx or Manhattan, if you in white flight time, you went to Westchester and you went to New Jersey and also Rockland County. So, you're right. And they're very, very different Jews, quite frankly.
I was just thinking, if you ask this question to Jim Jarmusch or Woody Allen, both of whom set their stuff in New York, they would have two very different answers,
Absolutely.
because their New Yorks are two completely different New Yorks.
And that's
And that's
something.
kind of what I feel about answering the question about Baltimore. If there's enough writers and authors and filmmakers, ask them. Like we'll all have a different answer.
Well, but there is. I certainly wouldn't have expected you to give me the quintessence of what Baltimore is, but what I think is something that we have a luxury of in New York, and I'm not even sure if I don't think L.A. has this luxury. Maybe Chicago, but I'm not even sure that it does. New York has the luxury of being defined in so many different ways simultaneously that you can tell people, oh, the place is just run amok with crime, which isn't true, but that's what's being sold. Meanwhile, the same person to say, yeah, I'm going to go down to Wall Street and I'm going to go down to this, I'm going to go into Broadway. So even those people are not avoiding New York, whereas most other cities get defined by one thing. And that's what's so remarkably unfair and unrealistic. And that's why when something like, I was about to call it Sapiens, it was a great book, something like Thespian, when that comes out, it's not that it has to be the alter ego of Homicide, Life on the Street, but if people get to see that, then they get to see, oh yeah, there is crime. It's a city, but it's also this wonderful place where there are actors. There are people who are working in all different crafts and careers and jobs. And they but those are the kinds of things that on the level that we're all living, we all see. But when we're thinking about some other place, we don't go in that direction. We go in the direction of what is defining it now.
You know,
And you're
sorry, yeah.
helping. I'm sorry, just and just to kind of make you feel good, quite frankly, but not with that as the purpose. It should make you feel good to say this is a wonderful place that has a lot of nuance to it and a lot of good and bad like every other place. But I want you to see the textures rather than just all these ridiculous caricatures. And you're doing that. And I think that's wonderful.
I mean, look, there's no homicides in Thespian. There's no drug deals gone bad. It's not that kind of show. You know, I think with Baltimore, you start thinking about heroin, and that became Baltimore was a major port. It's a port city, so a lot of drugs moving in and out of Baltimore, going from Baltimore up to New York. So there's that part of Baltimore, and then first there was the show Homicide, which wasn't as bad, and in fact, in some ways, Homicide did show a Baltimore that was quirky and had had a neighborhood feel and all that. It's The Wire that really sunk whatever was left of Baltimore's
reputation. Which, by the way, true. That's the thing.
It's written by a reporter for the
That's right. So I'm saying, like, it's not that these things are not necessarily true. It's that there's no balance.
And then also in a city of, at that point, maybe 700,000 or 800,000, yes, there are people there. There was a big drug problem here and a drug war that cost the lives of thousands over the years. But that didn't affect people who live in Roland Park. But people pretend that they're going to come to Baltimore and get killed. No, the crime rate's higher, but you have probably I don't know the statistics, but I'm saying you probably have a better chance of something else that's completely outrageous.
There are a lot of cities that are far more dangerous, and I would love to get into greater detail with it, but we are going to have to.
Freddie Gray riots too. I think
what's
that's
that? I'm sorry.
The Freddie Gray riots. What happened in 2015?
And by the way, right after that, that was just, it's interesting. Some people describe it as an uprising, a revolt, which is a positive thing to make changes to negative stimuli. That's what a revolt is. And then there are other people who will see it as a riot. The fact is, they're both true.
Well, I said riot on purpose because that's the viewpoint. I don't see it as a riot.
No, I understand that. But I wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
That it depends on your perspective what actually happened. But I will tell you that since 2015 to now, the murder rate, the crime rate has plummeted.
Yeah, it's a great city.
I have no doubt.
World-class baseball stadium, one of the best in the country. Seriously, Camden Yards.
It's a great stadium.
That's the stadium that started this sort of revolution where stadiums are now architecturally integrated into the space.
Texas Rangers did the same thing with theirs.
Rangers.
It was modeled right after as far as I know, was modeled on the Baltimore Camden Yards. Beautiful place. But I do know that time is running short.
Yeah, it's been a while.
And so, look, I mean, we're old friends. It's been a long time. Got a lot to say, but I love how who you are is not what you're trying to sell. It's you are just writing what comes to mind, and you, like every real artist, can't help but being but be molded by your environment and the events. And so the fact that you're in Baltimore, and I'd love for you to come back to New York, but if you stay in Baltimore, I'll have a greater appreciation of love for that city because of the love that you have for it. And that's what artists do. And so you do an important, I'm not saying that you need to be built up. I know your ego is perfectly fine. But the fact is, as an artist, you're doing exactly what art should be doing. It's trying to give a real story, but demonstrating the beauty underneath whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, sort of to tie this back to what I was saying about how, we moved to Baltimore and I hated it and wanted to leave. When I met my wife, and particularly the last 2 or 3 years since we've moved actually downtown, I feel like I'm starting to embrace Baltimore and understand Baltimore, and appreciate Baltimore in a way that I may not have if I hadn't sat down to start writing Thespian and looking for locations, quite frankly, and meeting people and people offering their restaurants to shoot in, and again living surrounded now. There's neighborhoods just like in Brooklyn and the Bronx, or neighborhoods where you don't really feel like Queens, where you don't really feel like you're in a city.
Yeah.
You're basically in a suburb. Well,
So,
there's lots of that in Baltimore,
yeah,
and I used to live in them, but now I live in Baltimore,
Baltimore.
and I love it. I
Yeah.
love it. Yeah.
Well, that comes through in your writing. It comes through in the passion that you have in today when we're talking. And I think it's just an important thing for people to just incorporate into their lives is we've just been trained over the last X number of years to make everything binary. I love it. I
Mhm.
hate it.
Yeah,
I'm a
yeah,
Republican. I'm a Democrat.
right.
It's like, it's enough already. Just let's actually examine everything simultaneously, the good, the bad, and the ugly, all of it. And that's what you do. And I know you continue to get better at it. Not that you are ever anything but good.
No, you do get
And
better. You do.
you get
Yeah,
better, and I know you
yeah.
have gotten better. And it's just so nice to come back to our friendship.
Yeah, it is.
And I'm looking forward to when you visit. I know you and your
It'll be
wife are going to
soon.
visit me.
It'll be
Good,
soon. Yeah,
good. Well, I got lots of places that
cool.
will I'll show you.
Great.
Anyway, thanks for being on What If I'm Right. And
Anytime.
for anybody listening, please, it's not a lot of money. Go to Amazon. Was it 99 cents an episode? It's worth at least a penny more than that, maybe even more. It's really wonderful.
Thank you.
Buy it, and I think it's terrific, and I'm so proud to be an old collaborator of yours,
Thanks.
even for a very brief period of time. So, Marc Unger,
Appreciate that. I
thank you
really
so
do.
much.
Thank you.